special branch and MI6 officer and the author of Black Ops.
I was undercover for special branch in a jihadi organisation.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe for free.
My name is Carlton King, and welcome to the Black Spy podcast, the show that shines a light on the hitherto closed world of secret intelligence, national security, and armed governmental personal protection operations, and looks at where that intersects with the geopolitical world that you all live in, and basically gives you an understanding of what we in the secret world do in your name. And in order to do that, I think I've come up with a relatively novel way, and that's to have guests on the show who live in their world and carry actions in their world, but I can show where the interconnections are with the secret world, the covert world, the world that I inhabited for 30 years. It's a new season. So welcome to season 2 of the Black Spy podcast. This is episode 000. And basically this is a scene setting episode for the new season. So who do I have? I've got my trusty sidekick with me again, Dan the Webman. Dan, how are you, buddy?
I'm not bad, thanks, Carlton. How are you?
Very well, thank you very much. So Dan, as listeners will know from season 1, is the guy I have who keeps an eye on what's going on my web pages, on socials, etc., any questions that come from individuals. And basically, he is to keep me in check, to tell me what you want to hear, what you think was good, what you think was not so good, how we could improve, so on and so forth. So what have you got for me today, Dan?
Well, first of all, the feedback has been fantastic from the listeners. So that's a positive. Really, I think, like you've just said, we're just going to talk about what's coming up on the new season. And we're just going to carry on the podcast from where we left off last time, really. So first and foremost, Carlton, do you want to sort of let the listeners know what they can be expecting from this new season and what direction you're taking it in?
Absolutely. Thanks. Well, in this season, what I want to do, well, I should say something about Patreon, because you've heard it in the new advert at the beginning of the show. And the reason why we've gone down the route of Patreon for donations for the show is because obviously it cost for me to bring the show to the airwaves, to the ether. And what we're hoping is that some people who like the show for whatever reason will join in and basically donate. Now, the donations are not large. So the first donation starts at $5, so around £3, €4. And basically what an individual would get for that, if they do choose to donate to the show on a monthly basis, would be that you would get special podcasts that are not for general consumption, so that don't go out in the air within the normal season. So therefore, example, if something of great interest happens in the world, you will get my view on that specifically for you solely and give you some analysis. Secondly, then, if you donate a little bit more, we're looking at giving individuals an analytical understanding, an in-depth analytical podcast understanding of a particular issue. So it's more depth than previously. And that would go to all individuals who donate to the level of $10. And you can work out the version of pounds, etc. from there. And then we've got the final level, which we're setting at $15, which basically will get individuals the great opportunity of actually coming onto the show. And what will happen is that each 6 weeks, the names of all those who are at the $15 level of donation that keeps the show running, they will all be thrown into a hat, and then we'll draw out a name, and that named individual will be the guest for that week's show or the week after show, depending upon whether they can make it, can't make it, or whatever. And we'll discuss with them what they do. Because at the end of the day, I sincerely believe that everybody has got a story. And it's my job to bring out that story and to show it how it connects with the secret world. So that's basically the main thing we've got going with Patreon, Dan. That's one of the main themes. Other than that, we're going to have all the guests that we had before. We're hoping to get some high-powered celebrity guests additionally as well. And obviously look at all the issues that come to the fore as we speak. And that is obviously open to everybody as per normal. And I hope guys keep listening. But what I do want to stress is please, 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 how many pleases can I put in? Please do subscribe. Many, many more people listen to the show than subscribe to it. But if you subscribe, you're never going to miss any of the shows which come forward. The show after this one is with an individual known as Andrew Lowney. He is basically the #1 literary agent in the world. Yep, not in England, not in Europe, not in the US, but in the world. He has done that for many, many years. And we're going to talk to him about basically the secret world, because he has written quite a few books. In addition to being a literary agent, he's also an author. He's written quite a few books that lift the lid off things like the life of Lord Louis Mountbatten. So it's incredible. The life of the former King of England, Edward, who abdicated from the throne. He also has written about what he called Stalin's Englishman, Guy Burgess. So this is a guy steeped in that secret world, and I've got great discussions with him coming along. So we've got fantastic guests coming through this season. Is that all right for you, Dan?
Yeah, fantastic. That's giving us a bit of an insight into what the listeners can look forward to. So I think really we can just pick up where we left off from. I think when we had our discussion last season, it was basically a lot of listeners writing in and querying certain things, questions for you specifically. So I think I'll move on to a couple of those. And I've got a question really where a lot of people are just asking, aside from this podcast, what else does Carlton do, and what do you have in the works?
Right. Okay. Well, as you know, can I use the grand title of an author? Yeah, I wrote my memoir, which is called Black Ops, The Incredible True Story of a British Secret Agent, which is available from all good stockists, be it online or offline, library-wise. So Amazon obviously is the easiest one. Everybody can, everywhere in the world, you can get it via. And you could get that either on the Kindle, or you could get it as a hard copy paperback book. So if you really want to know what I'm about, then that's the easiest way to understand, gives you some sort of understanding of my history and the roles that I undertook. Other than that, I have for some time been talking with people in various, let's just say, entertainment industry, and there may be some news in the near future concerning that.
Brilliant. Okay. And yeah, moving on to another query then I have. So I think this is what the viewers really want to know. Is they see a lot of movies, a lot of TV shows, and they want to find out exactly what is real. Why is that real in a situation? So if I were to start with you, Carlton, by saying, if there was one espionage movie that you've ever watched that you thought to yourself, wow, this is pretty much spot on, what is it and why?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, very good. Very good. Right. The first thing I'd say is most espionage movies, as with most movies in general, tend to be American, because, you know, Hollywood is where it's at. and they're the ones who put out most of the movies, regardless of where you are in the world, and particularly if you're in the United Kingdom, we watch Hollywood movies all the time. So when I'm looking at that, I can only really say it from the perspective of me having worked with people in the FBI, in the CIA, in US, well, you're talking espionage. So if you were talking espionage, it would be those sort of areas, espionage and counter-espionage. If you were going to talk about protection as well, obviously I've worked with many people in Secret Service, US Secret Service. So I could look at it from that perspective and say, having looked at those and worked with people in those areas, this and this movie relating to the American way of doing it would be about right from where I see it from my perspective. I also worked for the American, as you know, or may not know if you read the book, you'll see, in the past as well, as a detective for them in their Department of Defense. So I've got some overview of it, and therefore I could say, yeah, this looks about how I think it's right, but I don't have the in-depth, obviously, because I've not been, example, to the farm in CIA and been through their training courses or whatever else. So I never on this show want to say something I don't know. So in terms of that, I can only say what looks about right from the perspective that I have. If I was critiquing an American show. If we look at British shows, you can think of things like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, very good as it pertains to some aspects of the work of what we call the security service, better known to general listeners as MI5. And I would say that's not bad as it relates to that, pretty good. So I would say that. But if you want me to give, and I don't think they do the special branch role that well in that movie, by the way, which is the interconnection between the special branch, who are police from Scotland Yard, and the security service, MI5, who are not police and therefore have no powers to arrest people, to require people to stay in a particular area or anything like that. So in the British system, which is quite different than most other systems, actually, there's this bipartisan system which requires these two parts to come together for things to function. Whereas in most other services, particularly in Europe, and indeed around the world, to be truthful, if you think of the FBI, there are a police body with police powers, so they don't need another body to arrest people or anything like that. I think kind of only really the Germans have a system like ours, because we, the British, put that system in place for the Germans. So other than that, if you think about the French, it's, the French internal security service is a police body, so they have all the police powers. So these are the type of things, what I say. The Spanish, it's, again, the Guardia Civil, or it's the Policía Nacional who are doing that role. So again, there's no need for this dual system, which we have in Britain. So their movies can be different. So, right, having asked the question, let me pick up then on a movie which I think, in terms of espionage, would fit well and not be over the top. I see the problem is a lot of these that do espionage tend to, your Bonds and your James Bonds and all that, they tend to want to go over the top. That's the problem. Let's answer it this way. If you looked at the original series of Homeland and Carrie Matheson and how she was, I think in the original series, right in the beginning, and this is what I'm saying, right in the beginning in the original series, I think the CIA role of her, right in the beginning, because of course it went over the top in the end, right in the beginning, was actually not that bad, taking into account that she had a bipolar problem herself. But the role how she was playing it was good. I'll tell you another one that was very good, thinking about it. Zero Dark 30. Good movie about hunting down bin Laden. Good. Interaction playing with special forces. Good. Yes. Good movie. Well worth watching. So I'd say that. if I want to go away from the whole of the movie and start going into depth on issues, and I want to spread it out just from espionage into other areas as well. So let's look at undercover operations, something I've done a hell of a lot of, and also long term. I would say if you want to look at a long-term undercover, not in espionage work now, not in secret work, but if you want to have a look at a good espionage movie, you could go, a good undercover movie, you couldn't go wrong with Donnie Brasco.
Yeah.
I mean, it is superbly done. I know it's not in my field, but the actual working on undercover, on how to get in, having somebody actually bring you in rather than you going into them, having learned your tradecraft, having understood how people function, the absolute paranoia of that game. I'll tell you now, nobody comes out of that. And yeah, what I should say, people talk about undercover sometimes, and what they actually mean is somebody who's in plain clothes. That's not undercover. It's not a police officer in plain clothes. It's not undercover. That's just a police officer in plain clothes. When you talk about undercover, what you are doing is you're taking on a new identity. You're becoming an absolute new person. You're going to live that person's life. And what most people don't understand is in living that person's life, something's got to happen with your life. So in other words, what you do is you tend to understand this is in long-term undercover work, quite early on, you understand that, do you know what? The only danger I really have is actually being me, the real person. So you tend to say, forget me, let's throw me away, and let's be the other person. Because the other person can't do me any harm, because that's who the people whom I'm with think I am. Every second I'm away from those other people, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, 3 hours, every second I'm away, there is a danger that somebody's going to see me who knows me from those other people, but I don't know. And then I've got to explain what I was doing somewhere else. So the tendency is then to say, well, why would I go home? Let's not go home, or go home as least as possible. If you've got children, let's not have the children call me dad or whatever. Let's not hold their hands in the street. Let's not go to their schools. Let's not do anything with them, because everything I do is dangerous to me and to them. So that plays with your mind. And within a very short period of time, because you know you're going to do this for a long, long time. So in a very short period of time, you get what's known as Stockholm Syndrome. In other words, you orientate yourself to the people you're meant to be moving into. And you become them, you believe them, and you become that person you say you are to them. And I don't know anybody who does that properly who doesn't pay a mental price for that.
That's what I was going to query. How do you deal with it internally then? If you have to forget the person who you truly are, does that cause conflicts later on? Absolutely.
If you've done this job properly, you have mental issues. There is no doubt about that. There's mental illness. It derives mental illness. It orientates you towards mental illness. Now, of course, the organisations that do this, and in Britain there's only one that did it, they never tell you that. So they never tell you that these are the pressures, because, if you're taking the special branch, you do short-term undercover stuff all the time. In MI6, short-term undercover all the time. Yeah, that's not a problem, because you're going backwards and forwards, you're doing something, it's a problem. But it's not a problem. So especially if you're abroad. So if you're in MI6, Secret Intelligence Service, most of your action is going to be abroad. So I can go abroad for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 5 months, who cares? Come back, because there's no interaction between it, because I'm out there doing something. Yeah. When I come back, I can be me. If you're doing that at home, there is no such thing, because everywhere you are is dangerous to you. So the mental problems are for long-term and in your own home. Now, if you're out, and I'm not calling anybody down who's doing short-term drug buys in the drug game, you're buying drugs from somebody, they're short-term operations, they're going to go in front of a court. So that in itself is something that holds you back. because you know it's going to go into a court. You've probably got people watching you when you're doing your drug buys because the police are nearby, your police colleagues nearby looking after you. What you've got to realize in this sort of world when you're doing it long-term by yourself, there is nobody there. It's just you. There's nobody looking after you. There's nobody watching you back. There's nobody making sure you're not being stabbed in an alley. Nothing. It's all down to you. All by yourself. There is no training because what's the training for that? Zero. There isn't any. The only thing that you can do is create your legend, who you say you are, and know it backwards. Because what the guy asks you in day one, he may ask you in day 365. And it better be the same.
So you say that there's no one there watching them. So when you're saying that when people are going undercover in these sorts of environments in the drug world, they haven't got a team watching them?
Well, in the drug world, they do. That's the point I'm making. In the drug world, generally, because it's a police operation or a customs operation or whatever, or in the case of Donnie Brasco, it's an FBI operation, there is somebody there watching this process. There's somebody there who you're reporting to because it's going to go in front of a court at some stage. People are going to get nicked. What I'm saying is when you're doing that in terms of subversion or espionage, there's nobody there. Completely different. So, as I say, that's why I make the differentiation between Donnie Brasco, drug world. Don't get me wrong, Donnie Brasco, what he's doing, if the mafia think he's wrong, he ends up getting killed.
Yeah.
You know, it is what it is. If he's not, he gets, as they would say, he gets whacked. You know, he gets whacked in the lingo, you know. But what I'm saying is he's got a backup system and he knows what he's doing because he knows in the end of his operation, he's wanting to put away X amount of people into prison. And in terms of Donnie Brasco, it's 100 odd people he put in prison. Yeah. When you do these other type of intelligence gathering operations, nothing happens. That's it. So it's a different game altogether. So yeah, Donnie's great. I'll tell you another one like that, which was very good, which got over the psychosis of it better, was The Departed with Leonardo DiCaprio. That again, you got his psychosis. You understood how fearful he was. You understood how he was thinking, how am I doing this? What is this about? Again, it was more in the criminal world, but you got that feel from it. One that wasn't in the criminal world was, and is well worth a watch, so if people want to see it, is it's a French program, and it's basically about the DGSE, which is our external service, same as CIA or MI6. It's called the Bureau. And basically, it's about deep undercover, and the guy's in Syria, and then how he comes back, but how he's conflicted by the whole issue, and then how that leads to other things and to other things and to other things. So I won't spoil any of it because it's a brilliant program. So that is a brilliant program. And again, that is now in the world of secret intelligence and national security. But that's a series rather than a film, and it's well worth watching. It's superb, in fact. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, you mentioned a few there, and you also mentioned Homeland as well, season 1 at the beginning. Yeah. So in that we see Carrie Matheson going into houses, etc., and planting microphones and spying materials. How real is that in terms of the powers that you have or you had in your role? Would you have been able to, off your own back, decide, right, I'm going to go into this house, we believe that this person is a target, we're going to go in this house and we're going to spy on them? Where do you get that authorization from? Is that something that is easy to do? Do you get that permission given to you easily? Is a lot of work go into that? Elaborate on that for me, please.
Yeah. Well, no man or woman is an island. So basically, you can't do things by yourself. And also, rank is a factor in all these things. So if I look first at special branch role that I was doing, so that's countering espionage, countering terrorism, countering subversion, countering proliferation, sometimes in tandem with the security service, MI5, sometimes not. Now, with that, if you are a desk officer, which was a DC rank, a detective constable rank in Special Branch, in the Metropolitan Police Special Branch, I should say that. So the Metropolitan Police Special Branch is Scotland Yard Special Branch, and it differentiated itself from all the other special branches in the other police forces in England and Wales and Scotland. insofar as in the Metropolitan Police Special Branch, Scotland Yard, for want of a better term, Scotland Yard Special Branch, you basically have to take a whole load of examinations, pass a whole load of systems, and then be vetted to the highest level. And what that means is they check to make sure that you are not open to being turned one way or the other by somebody else. So you can then see the secrets of the state, high secrets of the state in the United Kingdom. You then, after doing all of that, you then enter the branch and get some training, and then you become a desk officer in a particular role, whatever might be. And at that desk officer role, you have a lot of freedom to carry out operations, depending on what that might be. Or you did have, because it's been disbanded back in 2006, particularly during the Cold War. That was the case. So that's the Soviet Union, Warsaw Pact, against the Western allies who were fighting in there and trying to prevent communism from taking over. A lot of things could be performed. But as a DC, even though you were the desk officer, and even though you had all the information and knew what was going on, you didn't have the authorizing power for those type of things. That stayed at higher ranks, sergeants, detective inspectors, and beyond. They would have the rank that would say, right, yeah, we can do this, and this, or we'll get that done. Now, within Special Branch, you had a lot of different elements. So in those days, and Special Branch is disbanded now in the Met, in S Squad, they had surveillance capacity. So you could have people surveilled, 24 hours, not 24 hours, but have them surveilled everywhere where they go. And surveillance isn't like you see it in the movies. It's not a fella sitting in a car or a fella and a woman sitting in a car lying back when they see somebody coming towards them. No. The Special Branch surveillance teams are like 16, 17, 18 people. Cars, motorbikes, even up to the Met's helicopters. Everything could be utilised in order for you to surveil somebody. Yes, technicals could then be put in. So observation points were taken over at the place you wanted to look at. And yes, if you have warrants from a judge, then you have the authority to put in some type of technical stuff that can be utilised. Now, that could be done in isolation in the branch, or could be done in the branch with the security service, depending on what the job was. Security service at MI5, depending on what the job was. So all these things can happen, but they are controlled by a system. And the system often includes these judges, authorization from leading politicians sometimes, depending on what it is. So the Home Secretary, which in America is the same as the head of the Homeland Security politician, or the more senior internal politician other than the president. So that's what you're looking at, where you were getting these authorities and authorizations to carry out roles. So it's controlled in Britain. These were not things used willy-nilly. These were things used, under a very strict control about how things function. So they were done, they are intrusive and were performed because at the end of the day, you're trying to protect the state. Yeah, so it's not just criminality now, you're protecting the state because the state was being undermined. The state of the United Kingdom was being undermined, be that by terrorism or espionage or whatever it might be.
Did you notice any, I know from listening to previous podcasts or reading previous articles that more predominantly in America, they've said that since 9/11, there was a lot of changes put in place that made it easier for them, authorities, this is to maybe interrogate terrorists or to have a bit more freedom in terms of what they were able to, maybe in terms of surveillance, in terms of terrorists. Did you notice any change in the UK?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, Dan. You're absolutely right. That I wouldn't say it got easier necessarily. What I would say is the actions happened potentially a little bit more on the terror area. It's not like the Patriot Act in the United States that made it different. We already had different laws because, of course, we'd been fighting the IRA for 30 years. And people should understand it was the role of Scotland Yard Special Branch to fight the IRA. And that was the organization that was doing the greatest damage to the United Kingdom, blowing up, half of the city of London, blowing up parts in Manchester, blowing up, this is just now internally in Great Britain. If you now talk about what was happening in Northern Ireland, so you class the UK, what they were doing in Northern Ireland, the IRA, and the activities, bombs going off every 2 minutes. So powers were already there in Britain. Powers were there to prevent actions under the Prevention of Terrorism Act. So there were already awesome powers there for special branch to utilise in many ways. Even if you moved from one part of the United Kingdom, Northern Ireland, to another part of the United Kingdom, England, Wales, or Scotland, you had to go for a special branch control, right? So the special branch officers would be there at airports, seaports, to look for people who they thought were terrorists from the north of Ireland, right? So that's how that was already. So moving from one party country to another was, potentially problematic because of that. So already there were powers there in Britain. So it was a little bit different than 9/11 because many of the powers were already there in the UK. There was a battle already going on, and it wasn't a one-off like in September 11th. This was things that were being done all the time for 30 years. They blew up the hotel in which the whole of the government was sleeping. If we go back to Brighton, they fired rockets against Downing Street. I mean, people forget this now because there's been peace for quite a while, but they forget the level of activity there was with the IRA in the old days. So we were, orientated. It was always the job of special branch to defeat that. So we were already orientated towards that battle, much more than they were in the United States, for example.
Yeah, I understand that. So just to carry on from that point then, what's your opinion on the invasion of Afghanistan, Iraq after 9/11? Did you agree with it? Would you have done anything differently?
Well, I did say on the Afghan special, which I did, as you know, some weeks back, I said how I would have dealt with that and how I think was the right way to deal with it and how the United States, frankly, should have dealt with that was via what I call a police action. Now, what I don't mean is police officers going in and doing it. No, what I mean is when I say a police action, policing is control of society, right? So what actually should have happened is, in my mind, is an organization. So in fact, we shouldn't even put both things together. 9/11 happened, and listen, I spent an inordinate amount of time in Afghanistan and an inordinate amount of time in Iraq. And I've seen countless Americans whom I knew who went to their graves thinking, example, that Saddam Hussein had something to do with 9/11. Let me tell you categorically, he had nothing to do with it. Indeed, Al-Qaeda and other types of jihadis were an anathema to him because those jihadis who were religiously inspired and religiously based would look at somebody like Saddam Hussein and say, basically, this guy is an apostate. He's against the religion of Islam, right? So that's how they would have perceived that. So it would have been counterproductive. I know they're strange bedfellows, as you say, in this world, but it would have been counterproductive for them to create bodies. Now, what he was doing in the past was supporting bodies which he felt required some sort of support. So that was some of the Palestinian groups were supported by Saddam in its battle against Israel. So there are things like that. But if you're talking about religiously inspired activity, no. So let's put that out of the way as far as Iraq's concerned. So that should not have been any consequence of 9/11. That was jumped on by people in the US, particularly the vice president, to take the opportunity to get rid of Saddam whilst they could. So that's an aside. It's not real. Has nothing to do with 9/11. Now, when you look at Afghanistan and 9/11, yes, an organization which had its then base in Afghanistan because it had been chased out of the Sudan, then carried out an action against the United States. But me, I would have sent in special forces, intelligence service, special forces, police action to basically capture the individuals, Al-Qaeda, who carried out the attack. That's what I would have done. Yeah. So that's special forces, targeted operations. Look for the bosses, look for the people who's carried it out, bring them to justice, or kill or capture, as you know the statements, and suppress that organization. Not try and suppress a nation, because suppressing the nation, you know what it does, Dan?
Causes unrest, and I think it.
Correct. Correct, Dan. It causes unrest, and more importantly, it recruits a whole load of people to the cause.
Correct.
Because what you've done is you've gone in there and killed somebody else's brother, sister, uncle, cousin, aunt, whatever, mother, grandmother, grandfather, for an action carried out in America, and you've killed them by dropping bombs or whatever it might be, and now you've made enemies.
Is this why we saw the big uprising in ISIS?
Absolutely. You bring, because into the vacuum come people like ISIS. A vacuum is created. One of the big mistakes of the invasion of Iraq was, in fact, the invasion full stop. But after the invasion was to do a crazy thing. And that was to get rid of all the Ba'athists. Now, the Ba'athists were an organization created, of which Saddam Hussein was a member and then was in charge of the Ba'athist organization. And what they basically were, if you can imagine a party that takes control, let's say like the Nazi party, I'm not a Nazi party in Germany, you take control. That party then, if you want to get on, you have to be part of that party. And that's what was with the Ba'athists. So you have to be part of the party. Now, after the Second World War, what happened is they didn't say every person who was a Nazi can no longer work. Mm-hmm. Any person who was ever part of, let's give it its real name, the NSDAP, which is National Socialist Workers' Party, right? That's what it means in German, National Socialist Workers' Party, right? They didn't say anybody who was ever a member of the National Socialist Workers' Party can now no longer work in any part of government, because if they did, there'd be nobody running the country, right? What they said is, we will denazify you. And when I used to work for the Americans as a detective, I used to have files that I could look at where people had been denazified who now work for the US Department of Defense in some of the stores or wherever else they're working. So they actually took a route to say, we will denazify these people and make sure that they no longer believe in that ideology, and then we'll hire them, and then they're rehired, right? We didn't do that. What we did in Iraq, you say anybody who's ever a Ba'athist is out. So that means anybody in power, really. So all your generals, all your colonels, all these people with power. So what do? They think, well, I've got no way of making money anymore. So they now form their own organizations. And these are the ones who become the insurgents. These are the ones who then fight, who then begin to fight the occupation. And that's why you get insurgency. And before you know it, you get insurgency breaking out in many different ways. You get different religious segments fighting each other. It's a given, because nobody's put the lid on it. And so they asked me, you may or may not know, and if you read the book, you'll see it, Three Black Holes. They asked me to become the head of special branch in Iraq. So they wanted me to form a special branch in Iraq, where I became the head of it. And what I would do is then put down this insurgency using special branch technique. And that's the only job I've ever turned down, because I said no, because either I get killed, or in years to come, when I do rehire the people who were hired under Saddam, and they do use Saddam techniques to keep control of the action, then when it's all controlled and people aren't blowing people up or aren't chopping people's heads off or aren't doing all the stuff they were doing en masse, believe me, hundreds of thousands of people killed in that way, en masse, when that's not done, and I've controlled it by bringing about this special branch that is not like a British special branch, it would have to be more like a secret police, like a muharabat. When I do all that and the people are controlled and it's all over, then as sure as eggs are eggs, somebody turns around and says, this fella was a war criminal. And next minute I'll be in The Hague, gripping the rails, looking at 40 years of my life behind bars. So I said, no, I'm not interested. Right? Because what you've got to realize is politicians are duplicitous. Politicians want a job done, and then all of a sudden, plausible deniability, they forget they've ever ordered you to do or asked you to do X, Y, and Z. Now, I don't want to taint every politician with that brush, but I'm telling you, many are. So, you've really got to look after yourself and say, no, that I ain't going to do.
Yeah, I agreed. So, I mean, you mentioned in there as well, when you were discussing, where you were talking about Iraq, you mentioned about Saddam supporting some of the Palestinian groups.
Yes.
So what's your opinion now on the situation in Israel? Because, I mean, what you just spoke about, the situation there, they sort of mirror each other. But what's your opinion on the situation?
I think what the state of Israel did wrong is that it went down the route of basically being punitive. And so, as with the US and fighting its wars, punitive activity, by the way, talking about TV programs, you could do much worse than watch a program called Fauda, which is in the occupied territories. And it's about the actions of a special unit, which is part of Shin Bet, and which actually means special branch in Hebrew, SB. And it basically sees how they carry out their actions. And if you ever want a good program, that is a great program to watch. Fauda, excellent program.
Before you give me your opinion on that, can you just explain for me as well, and for the viewers, obviously, how you believe Israel has got to this point? Why are there these disputes between, obviously, Israelis and Palestinians?
Right. When the state of Israel was formed, what basically happened was the vast majority of people in that state were not Israelis. They were basically Europeans, Americans, whatever else, who had suffered the indignities of the Holocaust and the actions of the Third Reich and the murders that had taken place against 6 million Jewish people. So as far as the Jewish people were concerned, the only aid that they saw way to be sure of this never happening again was to have their own homeland. Okay? And that homeland should be the state of Israel. But of course, there was somebody else living there. And these were the Palestinians who had lived on that land and still lived there for 2,000 years, whatever the person, and had not moved out to other parts of the world. So what basically ended up was you had to take the land from these Palestinians. And that is always going to be a conflict. I don't care who you are, don't care what country you come from, I don't care what the reasoning is for it, you're going to have conflict. And so that is how that conflict has come about, and it's not been solved since that day. So the question could be asked, how was that ever going to be solved? I'm cut that short for the pure and simple reason we would not have time to hit that issue within the timeframes that we're doing of this particular one-off. But of course, if people want to hear more about that, want to understand how that issue functions, then please give me a shout. Coming back to Fauda, I knew a lot of people, good friends and colleagues in Shin Bet and in Mossad. To be truthful, I also knew good friends and colleagues in Palestinian forces as well. So I guess I'm an either way guy on that. Because what they realized was that, you could only come together to solve this whole problem. But what Fauda shows is what you have to do if you can't solve the problem. And I think it's a great program. It just comes to my mind because you're asking again other great programs. I'm not going to give you a program, but I'm now going to come to protection type of aspects or using of a weaponry. I'm now going to give you an excellent use of weapons tactics. And that would be, if you've ever watched the movie, I don't know, have you watched the movie Collateral, Dan?
I have. Yeah, great movie.
Right. Well, the Glock work carried out, when I say Glock work, the use of his Glock pistol, right, carried out by Tom Cruise in that movie when you remember the scene, the two guys are coming towards him and they want his money, and he's the bad guy. So we're not talking about good or bad. He's the serial killer. He's a gun for hire, isn't he? Contract killer. And he's got his Glock under his jacket. and a coat over it. And he tells the guys, listen, guys, leave it alone, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And the guys don't. And the use then, how he flings his arm back, pulls his glove, and the first shot he puts, what we used to call a sense of direction shot that comes straight as you draw the weapon out of the holster. It's straight out and it's at hip height, so you're not even aiming it. And you put bang, bang, double taps, as we call it. 2 rounds go straight in. So he's out and 2 rounds, bang, bang, straight in. And then he pushes out in a weaver stance, which is 1 foot inside, foot front of the other on the side. And he pushes out and he takes the other guy down. Boom, boom, double taps the other guy. It's absolutely fantastic. You know he has had somebody who's taught him and he has practiced and he's got it spot on. It's superb clockwork.
How much time of your, how much training did you do on those sorts of things? Is there a lot of gun work that you have to do? When you see these programs, obviously these guys always seem to be an expert in every field. Where in terms of training, where do you stop? I mean, you say obviously you're going to be working with weapons, obviously, which you need to. What else do you do in terms of training?
Well, let's get that clear. If you're in the Secret Intelligence Service, MI6, yeah, unlike James Bond, yes, you may be trained, and I mean maybe his initial training as a case officer. So that's the guy who does a James Bond kind of role, which I was a case officer. In that training, when you do the full training for that, there is some weapons usage and they show you how it works. But as a general rule, you're not carrying a weapon around with you.
Yeah.
It's superfluous. You know, you are carrying out covert secret operations. So if you were during the war zone, say in Iraq or Afghanistan or something like that, yes, you will have weapons training so you can use that weapon for your personal protection. But to carry that weapon out to do things like you see on the James Bond, no. Because if you are planning an operation in which you're trying to get a terrorist or bring a terrorist in or capture a terrorist or whatever it might be, or in some cases, you know, a terrorist needs to be neutralized, then frankly, you're putting the operation together. You're getting all the intel, you know where it's going, you know what's happened, how it functions, what you might want to do, blah, 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 blah. But the job for that, you're going to give to special forces because that's what they do. You know, they're soldiers, be it in the SBS, Special Boat Service, or Special Air Service. That's what their role is. So that's why I mentioned earlier on when I talked about a movie and I said 0 Dark 30, you didn't see it as you'll find in half these other movies that are not realistic and not true. 0 Dark 30 is actually based on a true element. The CIA officer isn't going in doing the job himself. No. What's happening is, and they've got their own sections in CIA that carry out actions as well, by the way. But they ask, you know, a SEAL team to do it, or a Delta team to do it, or Force Recon unit to do it, or whatever it might be. Or in fact, they've got teams of people who used to be in those forces that can carry out those actions. Did you see what I mean? It's horses for courses. So Joe Soap guy, who is a case officer, who's an intelligence officer, working intelligence, working his way through. He'll have an analyst in America, an analyst in the United who looks at analyzing elements, and he puts all that together to work a plan of action to carry out secret intelligence. He's not going around shooting people.
Yeah.
So the people who, if that's required, you're going to go to the people whose job it is to do that. Now, for me, in the special branch, you know, if I'm a desk officer working on, I don't know, let's say the South African desk in years gone by, I don't need a weapon to carry that role out, right? If I'm doing surveillance, right, as part of the surveillance unit, I'm not talking about you do now side surveillance, but proper part of the surveillance unit. Now I need a weapon because now I'm trained because, you know, I'm surveilling the IRA maybe, and these guys are carrying, yeah? So they are trained on weapons. Do you see what I'm saying? So that part of the branch doing surveillance, you're going to be trained to utilize a weapon. For me, if I'm in the protection section, which was called A Squad in the old days, yes, now I'm being trained on all types of weapons because I'm carrying out the role of protection. You know, I'm protecting the Prime Minister. I'm protecting the Foreign Secretary. I'm protecting if he comes to Britain, the United States President, or the President of Israel, or the President of South Africa, or wherever. So I need a weapon. So I'm now being trained on that. And a unit that I started, which was a unit that high threat, low infrastructure that went to high threat places, Afghanistan, Iraq, Colombia, Pakistan, Yemen, places like that were dangerous. So then I'm basically training on several different types of weapons. I'm training on a machine pistol. I'm training on what the army might use. So if we're working together, I know what the army use, so I can pick their weapon up if they're down. Yeah. So that's how that works. But but the basic of the training for a protection officer is absolute speed on drawing a pistol, and absolute speed from your car on drawing on lifting a machine gun, and utilizing that if necessary. Right. So it's in the areas that you require it. So I've got a target that's turning, 1 second, bang, bang, turning, and I want to get my weapon out, boom, boom, put rounds in it very quickly, because that's how people are assassinated. Yeah. It's no good if I can't react quickly, because if I can't react, your man dies. In fact, he probably kills me and then kills the guy. So, or kills me and several others if there's several others there, whatever the case may be. So your training is very, very good on that. Really good training capacity to deal with incidents that require immediate action. Now, all of that said, if you get it wrong, they will execute you. And I don't mean execute you properly, but they will absolutely come down on you and give you no support whatsoever. Right? Seriously, no support whatsoever. That's this is the juxtaposition of the United Kingdom.
They want to themselves from it as far as possible. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Totally and utterly. They'll put you in front of a court, mate, all day long. So you thought that this man had a gun to kill the Prime Minister.
And are you saying that?
And it wasn't a gun, it was an umbrella, let's say. But the fella drew it out from out of his jacket. And I've been trained to react extremely quickly to prevent this man killing the Prime Minister. And I think he's pulling a gun out, or let's say it's a toy gun even sometimes. And you come out and you bang back and you shoot and kill that guy, they will put you in front of a court as soon as you can say Jack Robinson.
Okay, and are you saying this is a universal thing, or are you predominantly?
No, it's in the United Kingdom, I'm saying. If you do that in the United States, they're going to probably say, well, the fella shouldn't have done that. Right? But in the UK, they're going to say, you see, police, because they're not going to say special, but they'll say, police, see that they're quick to use their weapons. It's terrible. He needs to go in front of a court. He needs to, be sentenced for this. Seriously, there is little support in the UK.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think there's a difference between and different countries? US, for instance.
I think the US stands to its people better. Okay, let's take a case that is clearly 100% wrong. Intelligence officer, I think from the National Security Agency, equivalent of our GCHQ, runs over a British guy on a motorbike and kills him.
Okay, yeah.
Because she's driving on the wrong side of the road. The US gets her out of the UK as soon as possible and then refuses to put her anywhere near the UK. I'm telling you now, if that's a British guy runs over exactly the same circumstances, there's no way he's being aided or assisted to leave the United States. They say, well, take your chance in front of a court, mate. That's the difference. The US seems to look after its personnel in government, its secret personnel. And
you think that's right, though? Do you think that's right? She's able to leave and not come back?
It's a tough one. Clearly, it's not right because she wasn't in the course of her duty doing that. But the mindset is that she knows a lot of secrets. And if you let her go into a court where I'm not looking after her because I've been seen just to wash my hands of her, what will she say? What will she do?
So you think it's more of protecting their secrets rather than...
And the personnel, because the personnel then can believe that we will be protected no matter what goes on. We believe we'll be protected. If we're doing our job, we'll be protected. That's what they're kind of believing. Now, don't get me wrong. If you do not do your job and you do something that they think is wrong, like the guy who provided secrets to everybody, they want to put you up and hang you and leave you in a solitary confinement forever. Right, so that's much stronger than it is in the UK. Yeah, so if they get hold of Snowden, he's in prison forever. Yeah. So that's the dual side of their systems. They'll look after you if they would perceive. I guess they're perceiving what's happened with the lady as an accident. I'm not going to mention any names, but I guess most people listening understand what we're talking about. They perceive it as an accident. I guess that's what they're saying. And therefore, we will protect her as we would, any of our people who are doing their job on the behalf of the state. I think it's at least a mistake, which you should probably go in front of a court for to see whether you were driving without due care or attention or whatever else. You know what I mean? And I can understand that. But what I'm saying is, if you do in Britain, let me give you something exactly concrete, because we're coming to the end. Some years back now, a Abu Nidal terrorist, and Abu Nidal was a Palestinian terrorist whose group was known to be extremely violent and out there and wanted to kill as many Israelis and stuff as they could. Okay, so this terrorist came to London and he basically planned to kill the Israeli ambassador. And the Israeli ambassador, because he's the Israeli ambassador, is obviously protected, or was protected in those days, by special branch. Okay, so they've been to the Dorchester to a meeting, and I knew the guy who was performing the protection. This is quite some years back now, quite some years ago. Basically, as they came out of the Dorchester, there were uniformed police around, who are obviously unarmed in Britain, and I think there was one DPG, Diplomatic Protection Group, uniform, because they're all uniform, the Diplomatic Protection Group officer there as well, who was armed, so only one officer. And then, of course, the SB officer who was protecting the special branch officer protecting the ambassador was obviously armed. Yeah, because that's the role of the branch. And so as they come out, all of a sudden, this officer, whom I knew, saw to his horror a man with a Scorpion machine pistol, and he saw it in a split second, but at the same time, the rounds went off. It's a small mini machine gun, okay? Hit the ambassador and he falls to the ground. Bang, he's down. So the SB officer draws his weapon. Wow, what's happened? Everybody's looking around, what's happened? Sees the ambassadors down, says to the uniformed police, look after him, get an ambulance, and he runs after the guy who carried the shots out, because the guy's looking around. So in fact, he aimed the weapon at the SB officer and it jammed, it didn't go off. So this terrorist now is running off, and what he's doing is he's trying to clear his weapon by racking it back, getting the round out. Mm-hmm. So as he's trying to clear his weapon, he clearly clears it as the SB officer's running after him, and he turns to look at the SB officer, right? To clearly shoot him. So the SB officer has got his weapon, bang, one aimed shot. And in those days, we were using a Model 64 Smith & Wesson, very small snub-nosed revolver, which frankly wasn't particularly accurate, but he did a great shot him, fella goes down. Kicks the weapon out of the way, he's got him down. They put the SB officer on trial.
Really?
Absolutely. Now, he's found not guilty because he was saying, guy was running away, but he did turn on me. Because the argument was, well, if he's running away, how is he a threat to you? This is fellas with a loaded machine pistol. He's fired rounds that have put down an ambassador. He's running through a crowded area with his weapon. He's trying to clear his weapon so it can fire again, but you're still put on trial.
I suppose that hinders you as well as that officer. You may think twice before drawing your weapon in that situation then.
Correct.
Correct. Yeah.
And this is where the problems begin to lie. For every actual action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So the very last thing, because we're running out of time, Dan, was that I can remember on a job, the base of the job is in the book if you want to read it. And basically the IRA were coming in to kill a British official in his home. We knew this because of certain reasons, and you can read it. So I was on the Libyan section at the time, nothing to do with Irish. And we were in what was known as E Squad, which is the section that deals with the rest of the world from the branch. And I'd just been out to try and find out about a Libyan secret agent who I figured this is the agent. And I was writing a paper up to go to the security service, MI5, the following day, where we were going to discuss how to deal with this secret agent who was a Libyan. So I'm in there, and there was a DI who was an Irishman in the branch, who was on the Irish section, and which was called B Squad, that dealt with dealing with the IRA. And I can remember him, I can even hear it now, in walking to the corridor saying, any gunmen, right? Any gunmen, he was saying. So, and it was after 6 o'clock, so 10 to 6 normally the branch works, 6:30. So it's after 6 o'clock, and I'm trying to get ready to go home. So I want to finish this report off. So I was in there, and also on another 2 sections away from my desk was a colleague who was working on the Indian section. And he'd just come back from looking at an Indian aspect that was going on, and he was writing up his report for the Indian section. So I looked at him because I knew he was trained, yeah. As I was trained, I'd been on protection. And this guy actually happened to have been in the Met's firearms unit, because Metropolitan Police has a firearms unit which goes to all the firearms jobs, and they're highly trained in all different types of firearms, right? Different types of weapons, firearms for weapons. So I said, yeah, okay, Fowler, come with me. Yeah. And then he sees the other guy, like, yeah, come with me, you two. So we go in, and we go into B Squad, the area where that is, which deals with the Irish stuff. And they said, right, we've got blah, 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 blah. We know this and this and this is happening. Okay. So I said, all right, do you want us to protect the individual and get him away? No. We want you to wait for the unit to turn up, the active service unit, which is the IRA active service unit, basically a band of several killers who were there to basically kill the individual, and give them the good news, right? So I say, all right, well, if I can get an MP5 machine pistol, and your man here says, oh, give me a shotgun or something, he said, no, we can't have that. When we start pulling out these type of weapons, people will want to know what the score is, and this is top secret, right? So we can get away with our pistols. So if you use your pistols, that'll be good enough. So now I'm on the Libyan section, right? So I know that Colonel Gaddafi has sent to the IRA some of the latest weapons, which are going to far outweigh my little Smith & Wesson pistol that I'm going to go up against. But anyway, we say yes. So we both go in with our pistols, and we sit in this house. And it's nighttime, so we're in there for the nighttime, and they're meant to come in today. And this unit, we had an idea how many people they were, are meant to come in, kitted up with some of the latest weapons at that stage, to give, to sort your man out to kill him. And we're going to prevent that. So it gets too late. And so we say, well, let's pretend we're going to go to bed. Yeah. So we turn the lights on upstairs in the bathroom. Then we turn the light off in the bathroom. And then we sneak back downstairs, and we go into the bedroom and make it as though we'd gone to bed. And then we sneak back downstairs because the individual and his family had been moved away, you see, secretly moved away, and were being protected. So we were in there just to confront these experienced killers. Yeah. So we're sat there, and we turned over a table or two on the side, and Seti turned them over and covered our angles. And about 1 o'clock, maybe a bit later, we hear sort of a scratching, like somebody using jigglers. You know what jigglers are?
No, don't know.
Jigglers are the thing you use to get into open locks up if you haven't got the keys.
Yeah.
Okay. So we hear like somebody using the jigglers to try and open them up to get in. And then the door starts to open up. And I tell you, my heart is beating. Yeah. Because this can only be the boys coming in to do a job of work. And the door opens up. And the idea was to give them a good news. Now, even in that circumstance, we never discussed it, but both of us, as soon as the door opened and we could see, we both shouted, "Armed police!" Which actually would give them the upper hand in a way. Even though we got our weapons pointed at them, they then know who it is. And if they're going to fight the way out, it's straight in. Because there's only one coming through the door. The other three might not. They'll just put rounds in us. But we do that. Why do we do that? We do it because we know that if it goes wrong, nobody's going to support us.
Yeah.
And we put ourselves in threat. I won't tell you what happened because I'll let you read the book.
Left a list on a
cliffhanger. So that was it, guys. So Dan, have you got anything else for me? Because we've actually gone massively over time. So if you've got anything else for me, my friend, that the listeners might want to hear or do or whatever, please tell me. If not, we're going to call it a day. And you'll be back, Dan, won't you?
I'll be at some point. I mean, like I said, I've got 101 questions here, but I'm conscious of the time and going over. So I'll let you wrap it up. It's been a great discussion. Just thank you very much, Carlton.
Dan, thank you very much. You're going to be back on. In fact, we're going to do much more because, as I said before, we're going to talk about Patreon. And when we do, we can do some of these just for the Patreon listeners. You know what I mean? Some special ones that we come out with. You and I can get together on it. So listen, guys, thank you very much. Thank you for everybody listening, and see you again next week.
Thanks a lot.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe for free.
Here is a working class spy telling his stories, the secrets, the lives of spies. Feel free to message Carlton King on all socials and give this show 5 stars on Apple iTunes and subscribe so you never miss a single episode. For your ears only.
I was a member of Her Majesty's Secret Intelligence Service.